How's everyone doing? It's Indiana with Emptoraudio. Well, I've got 3 amps in front of me, and they're not all identical amps. It's not totally apples to apples here. The one on my left here is the SMSL AD18, and it does actually have a DAC built into it. So it's going to be, basically an integrated amplifier with also a DAC in there as well. In the center here, I've got the Fosi Audio V3. This is their all-new amp. And then I've got the, I think it's pronounced Aiyima, something like that. I don't really know how to pronounce it very well. But this is their current model of the A08 Pro. And this thing's got that really cool, VU meter on the front, kind of lights up, looks really neat, kind of tells you how much power you're using at a time. Now, these 3 amps in front of me, this is kind of going to be, your general, if you're looking to pick up, an amp for your desktop audio. Of course, there's like a billion options out there. There's so many options to pick from. But these are just kind of 3 options that I've been taking a look at recently. They're going to be somewhat in the same price range. If I had to, adjust these by like in order of cheapest to most expensive, I'd probably go like this here. With the Fosi Audio being at around 80 bucks, SMSL, I think it's like around 130, and then the A08 Pro, I think, is a little bit more expensive than that. I think it's like around 150, 160. So if you put them in this order, if I had to rate them between, how well they sound, I'd put them in this order here, actually, with over here being the best sounding and over here being the not so best sounding. Now, that's kind of interesting because the Fosi Audio is quite a bit cheaper than these other 2 options here. From just my listening experience on these, the Fosi Audio just has so much low end to it. It just sounds, it almost sounds like something was just missing in a lot of desktop audio, and it just kind of brings in that nice low end. I mean, I'm not running, the biggest speakers, I'm not running a subwoofer, but this thing just brings in so much bass, so much power to the amp that it just really fills in a lot of what I think was missing from a lot of other amps that I've listened to. Now, the A08 Pro also does very similar to that. It's got a ton of power built into it, and I really do like the VU meter. Now, when it comes to, looks, I will say I am a bit biased towards SMSL. I do like how they design their units a lot. I will say I'm a big SMSL fan. The AD18 in this realm here is definitely not the best sounding amplifier here. I've said this, 100 times before, but when you put in a preamp, an amp, a DAC all into one unit, and it's not, that expensive, you're going to have a few things here that are not going to be up to par. There's actually a headphone amp built into here, and it can't be much more than like a $20 headphone amp that's built in, just because, they got to put all the money into the preamp, the amp, the DAC side here. So there's going to be some, place they got to save some costs somewhere in that amp there. A lot of times you get to more of like separates like these two, and these aren't necessarily separates. There's actually, a preamp and an amp built into these. Of course, you get into a bit better quality there. Not all the time, but you can kind of get into better quality when you get into more separate pieces, because you can kind of mix and match what you want and really make the system sound how you want as well too. These are pretty compact units. It's kind of which size and style do you want. The VU meter is pretty cool in the A08 Pro if you're kind of going for more of that classic look. If you're familiar with like Macintosh, they've always got the VU meters in a lot of their stuff, but of course it's not the same, green glow by any means. Now the SMSL, on the back here, one thing that I've never really liked about this unit is that there is no unbalanced in. Well, other than, of course, this little auxiliary jack, which is basically just a 3.5 millimeter jack. I'm using this with my SMSL DO300. You gotta come RCA out to a 3.5, and it's kind of annoying, especially when I'm trying to swap out different amps. I gotta swap out the cable too. It's kind of annoying there, but that's kind of is what it is with this unit, and they're trying to just save space, of course. Now let's talk between the A08 Pro and the Fosi Audio. They both kind of claim right around that 80 watts, depending on which power supply you have, of course. They do sound, both very, very powerful, but the Fosi Audio, the amount of clarity this amp really brings is quite impressive. I do like how you can change out the volume knob there. It's a very, how should I say this? Maybe just very simple amp. There's not anything you don't need on this amp. It's purely just designed for the sound. There's not a lot on here when it comes to cosmetics. When you like look at the A08 Pro, that VU meter, how they style the case there is a little bit different. Of course, that costs extra money, of course, too. But the Fosi audio is just an insane value for this V3. It's honestly one of the best amps I've heard to date that's been under $100. And I'll go as far as saying it's probably the best amp I've heard that's under $100, bar none. Easy to say that. So it's just a great sounding amp. But the A08 Pro I still think is a rather impressive unit. Of course, when you look at the backs, you can definitely see that they are very similar in design. You both have an unbalanced input on these, and of course you've got your usual speaker terminals coming out. So nothing really too crazy there. I think the A08 Pro, it does have a remote control, I believe. Yeah, it does have remote control on there. And then they both have pre-outs. For subs, but there's a little bit of an asterisk there. It's not, you know, controllable pre-outs per se. On the Fosi audio, I believe it's just a fixed pre-out, and then I think on the A08 Pro it's adjustable. I might be wrong on that one. I have not tried these out. I'm not a huge fan of putting, you know, a sub into my desktop audio system. It's kind of hard to, you know, mix a sub when it comes to them always changing out speakers and amps and DACs. It's hard to really get a sub that's going to work with everything, you know, really sound really good. And I'd rather not, you know, tune back in a sub for every setup I've got. So I just really haven't messed with the sub too much. But at the end of the day, you know, if you're looking for just like a DAC, or you're looking for an amplifier or a preamplifier, you've got so many options to choose from. Like for this unit, I'm actually bypassing the DAC entirely out of here. So, I mean, you can just go right in that auxiliary port and run auxiliary off there and bypass the DAC and use a much better DAC, like let's say a AD18 from SMSL, as what I'm using myself. And you've just got so many options to use here. You could really cool to always find out something that you maybe think sounds a little bit better, sounds a little bit worse. And I will say, I don't like to not use the term, you know, worse or better. A lot of audio is going to be, you know, do you like chocolate or do you like vanilla? It's kind of like, what flavor ice cream do you like? All of these different components here can be different flavors of ice cream. One of these isn't necessarily better or worse. I mean, of course, they can be worse. You get a lot of noise in them, or they just don't sound good to anyone. That's possible too. But when you get into, you know, decent quality brands of audio, a lot of times what you hear can be slightly different from what I hear, and we might just not like the same thing. So some people like, you know, Macintosh, some people like, you know, Yamaha. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, just find what you like and find a brand that you like as well too. But if I had to say one thing at the end of this video, I would say definitely check out the Fosi V3. It's the cheapest unit of all three of these here, and it's honestly a fantastic amp. Pair this with a nice little DAC, maybe a $100 DAC, and for under $200, you've got an amazing system ready to go there. A08 Pro definitely has some, you know, classic throwback with that VU meter on the front, very cool. And the SMSL 18 here is AD18 here is pretty cool with having, you know, a built-in DAC and being just so tiny here. I mean, it's really not that big of a unit. Of course, you know, it gets a little cramped on the back end there. And there's really no EQ settings on here too, which is kind of disappointing. I wish I could turn the bass up a little bit on this unit. But other than that, they all have their strengths and their weaknesses here. So there's many options to choose from, guys, and what I would say to do is just keep trying out options, see if you find something you really like, because I like SMSL, and I'm not going to say, you know, every unit sounds amazing. The AD18 I think is good, but not excellent, is how I would describe it. But, you know, when you find a brand you like, you know, you can kind of, you know, level down your choices a little bit, especially when you like, you know, the look of a unit that they make, and they can kind of continue making that look as well going into the future. So guys, thanks for watching, take care, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.